What's the most awkward wedding moment you've witnessed? We showed up to a wedding where the bride was not the girl everyone was expecting. Turns out the couple had called it quits like 2 weeks before, but the groom was so cheap he did not want to lose all the money invested in the wedding reception. So he decided to ask one of his ex-girlfriends to marry him. The girl accepted. It was very awkward because everyone at the wedding was talking about it. An 8-year-old kid got a hold of the mic during the open floor toasts and started singing the Star-Spangled Banner. Slowly everyone stood to face a flag. There were no follow-up speeches. There's never a wrong time to be a patriot. At my sister-in-law's wife's sister wedding, the best man got up for his toast and told everyone how miserable my sister-in-law had made the groom during a rough patch, and that he had told the groom to leave her multiple times. But I guess he didn't take my advice, so I'll learn to deal with it I guess. Don't say I didn't warn you, and sat down. Dead silence. Super freaking awkward. I worked in catering service at weddings for quite some time, and the most awkward thing I've ever seen was probably when after first dance bride and groom invited their parents to dance too. Bride's father was on wheelchair and the song Thief chosen for this dance was I Am Never Gonna Dance Again, and the father was just sitting there watching them dance. It was pretty brutal and I cringed hard. To be fair, the song is actually called Careless Whisper and is really not appropriate for a wedding anyway. What started off as toasts from friends quickly became a roast the newlyweds as the alcohol flowed, but in a mean way, not the funny way. Really awkward. I'd just like to say John is a piece of crap and Mary is a total B. Hahaha JK guys. JK. To John and Mary. My own wedding. Mother of the bride was a thundering B. Everything, literally everything, was about her. Example, on the afternoon of 9/11 she called to speak to my fiancé and I said words to the effect of I can't believe what happened today, I'm in shock, so many dead, to which she replied yes well I have my own problems. At her grandchild's baptism the year before she asked to make a speech, didn't mention the baby once, but instead insulted the entire congregation for not respecting her enough and ignoring her issues. The baptism before she had droned on for half an hour about her bad back. My bride was determined she wouldn't hijack the speeches with her bulls. We had a cordless mic and the best man was primed to hide it from her the moment the official speeches were over. She was on antidepressants and God knows what else, and during the meal drank a lot of wine. We had chosen the venue because the food was absolutely stellar. 5-star chef. Totally organic vegetables and forest shot game. She announced loudly to the room I wouldn't feed it to a cat. The speeches happened and sure enough she wanted to rock the mic. The best man sleight of handed the mic and passed it to me under the tablecloth and then claimed he's lost it. Mother of the bride got up and started blundering around the room looking for it like King Kong looking for Fay Ray. One of the bridesmaids subtly tried to block her path and she hissed "Get out of my way you fricking B." A mild scuffle ensued and my bride ran into the toilets crying. The best man instructed the wedding guests that it was time to get up and mingle, whereupon the mother of the bride lay down on the floor in front of the top table howling and kicking her legs like a 3-year-old. A kindly uncle sequestered her to another room and my new wife didn't see or speak to her again for 5 years. I went to a Klingon themed wedding. The whole thing was awkward, but the announcer forgetting the bride's name was probably the most awkward occurrence. Klingon names are hard. My first wedding. We thought it would be a good idea to have the ceremony outdoors in a gazebo. It was September, so we didn't think the weather would be an issue. However, it was 90 degrees and humid. My mother, who was standing up next to my father during the ceremony, fainted midway through the ceremony. After a short break to revive her, the ceremony started up again. Then my best man, younger brother, then walked out of the gazebo to throw up. Then came the reception. Since my new bride was Jewish, they had people sitting in a chair and lifted them up. Then came my father's turn. Dad was a big guy, over 250 pounds. One of the guys that helped to lift him had to sit down afterwards because he didn't feel well. He was then rushed to the hospital because he was having a heart attack. Your own red wedding. The worst I saw was when they went to light the unity candle or whatever you call it. The cellophane had been left on. The whole process ended up taking about 15 minutes. The minister got so flustered that afterwards he says something And like this candle, your love will continue brining shitely. Luckily it was videotaped. Brine shite like a diamond. The groom said, no, never has someplace gotten so awkward to be at so fast. One wedding I went to had a bride who was wheelchair bound. She wasn't completely paralyzed, but her legs were very weak and she never really walked. At the end of the ceremony, they thought it would be cute to have her walk, with assistance, to her decorated scooter 20 feet away. It could have been a sweet inspiring moment, but she was so strained and in so much pain that everyone was uncomfortable. It was dead silent except for the occasional scream she let out. You could have heard a pin drop and it lasted several minutes. Longest 20 feet ever. My stepdad's grandson got his 16-year-old girlfriend pregnant, so they had a shotgun wedding. Being 16 and 18, neither had much money, so they had my stepdad rent out a building for both wedding and reception. The building is tiny, 2 bathrooms, kitchen, and some tables. Fast forward to wedding day, they taped up tablecloths as a room divider to separate ceremony and reception. The groom walks in from outside with his brothers. The bridesmaids come out of the bathroom one at a time, then the bride. Bride is pregnant, and about 6 months along, and her dress is tight. Ceremony starts, unity candles lit, bride vomits everywhere. Before the kiss, her maid of honor pulls up part of her dress and wipes the bride's mouth, because that's what MOH do. Yes. Time for the big kiss. You may kiss the bridegroom says can we do this later? Bride cries. Reception time. Everyone sitting at the table eating catered KFC and drinking water out of plastic wine glasses that disassemble at the stem. A tablecloth barrier has been removed to open up the dance floor. Bride and groom start dancing, and her dress rips down the side. She cries, runs to the bathroom, and puts on her pajamas that she arrived in. Marriage lasted less than 1 year. TBH, I kind of feel really bad for her. The groom, who apparently loves singing, but horrible with it. The guy can't carry a tune to save his life, was asked to sing a song, twice, without backup music, and we sat there looking at each other wondering if all that was a joke. I love technology, but not as much as you see, but I still love technology, always and forever. At my cousin's wedding, immediately following the new husband saying I do, her 5-year-old stood up on a chair, threw his fist in the air and yelled, "Kill the beast." That is just awesome. The groom's parents stood up and said that they paid for everything and the bride's parents were mooches, and then the bride's parents threw a bunch of $100 bills at them. Also, at my cousin's wedding, the great uncle that had molested her dad tried to make a speech about how cute her dad was as a kid. It didn't go well. Someone took the mic and basically shooed him off stage while everyone was just shocked. I want to be indignant and ask who invited the known molester, but having grown up in a family that covered up and excused abuse without batting an eye, I wish I was surprised. On my wedding day, I had family and friends take care of a number of details while I got my hair and nails done. I just left detailed notes as to how to do them. The flowers were delivered to the church and the note said that the mothers and grandmothers got the pink corsages. There were 5 corsages, 4 same size and 1 big one. They assumed the big one was the mother of the bride corsage and the other 4 were for Mill, 2 grandmas and 1 great grandma. It wasn't. I didn't order one for great grandma. The big one was the cake topper. My mom walked down the aisle with the cake topper pinned to her dress. Out of all these stories, this is the one that made me literally laugh out loud. It must have been a very large corsage. Went to a friend's wedding last week. The father of the groom's speech was breathtaking. His opening salvo was to describe the time the bride, who lives with the groom's parents on their farm, helped knacker a horse that had died in a storm. He then spent a bit longer than necessary talking about the fact that the married couple are second cousins by marriage, but still. He then essentially made fun of the fact that the bride was 6 months pregnant, saying they both agreed that they wanted to get married and have kids, but they forgot which one happens first, which would be fine. But the bride's family were ultra religious and seemed really unhappy he brought it up. This segued into a rather graphic story about horses giving birth. He went on for what felt like hours, but was probably 5 minutes. It was funny as heck, but I think the bridal party were a tad embarrassed by the end. I love inappropriate family members at formal events. At my aunt's wedding during her dance with her uncle who had brain cancer, her dad died long ago. His belt broke and his pants fell down and he chose to go commando that day too. My aunt had to bend down and pick them up for him and held them up as they finished their dance. This one's just terribly sad. My father's second wedding. Context: my father and mother divorced when I was a very young age. He met somebody new. I hate her. He had 2 boys with her over the course of a 20+ years, who I do not hate. They end up tying the knot. I put my differences aside for the day. Everyone's happy. The reception rolls around, and she makes a speech, and one of the lines was, "I just want to thank everyone for coming, especially my family, my husband, and my kids, and a huge welcome to my new extended family who have been in for years anyway, mum and dad." At this time, her family lets out an audible "ooh," and her sister shouts out an "OP, oh yeah and OP," to say the least. Her family know we don't get along, and this was looked down on for the rest of the reception. I found it humorous. Everyone else found it awkward. I was drunk, so I didn't care. I just sat there plotting my revenge, possibly murdering her with a grape in some fashion. We were at a wedding where the couple's dog was the ring bearer. Came time for him to give the rings and he couldn't be found. Turns out someone left him in the car and he actually died of overheating during the ceremony. So that was fricked. Jesus freaking Christ. Talk about a bad omen. I was the best man for my buddy when it came time for speeches. The groom's stepdad got up and started subtlety bashing my buddy's real dad about how he's never around and that he, the stepdad, raised him and glad he did or he wouldn't have turned out to be such a good guy. My buddy leaned over to me and said, "Get that freaking mic off him now." Went to a wedding of an extremely religious couple. About halfway through the ceremony, the bride starts washing her husband's feet like Jesus did for the disciples. I have no idea what it had to do with getting married, but it was very uncomfortable watching a woman bent down scrubbing her almost husband's feet in front of a silent crowd. Oh, this happened at my boyfriend's brother's wedding. They both washed each other's feet, and it was probably the longest and most awkward 7 minutes of my life. I was happy for them though. It was something that clearly meant a lot to them. I just didn't get it. I don't think I've ever been to a wedding that wasn't awkward. 1. My cousin's wedding. He decided to have his bachelor party the night before his wedding. Terrible idea. He showed up 30 minutes late to the ceremony. It was a 90-degree July day and an outdoor wedding. Everyone was miserable. They had written vows about looking into each other's eyes, but he refused to take off his sunglasses because he was so hungover, and because he was hiding a black eye from a bar fight. They're still married 15 years later, somehow. 2. My friend handed out programs at her wedding with a timeline of events, which is fine, but one of the events was first acceptable time to leave if you want to remain friends. She stationed an attendant in the parking lot to note anyone who left before that time. 3. Another friend had a 2-hour secular wedding ceremony. They did all of the unity traditions, candles, biting apples, tying sailor's knots, and performed original love songs in alien costumes. There was no indication on the invitation or even in conversations with the couple that it would be this way. 4. At a friend's wedding, the DJ invited single women to come up for the bouquet toss. Then he says, "Widows, you count as single, too. Come on up." Several women started crying. The groom was the only survivor from his Marines unit that was attacked in Afghanistan, and he had invited the wives and girlfriends of his fallen comrades. The DJ apparently didn't know that. Oops. How much can go wrong with one wedding? Let's count. 1. The bride was late to the ceremony because her hairdresser had more important clients that took priority to getting her to her wedding on time. People wondered if she got cold feet. 2. The photographer was really slow, as in, post-ceremony pictures took 90 minutes. Guests were already leaving the reception before the wedding party arrived. 3. The bride fell head over heels, not just in love, but face first while walking into the reception hall during the wedding party introductions. 4. The table centerpieces at the reception hall were lovely. That is until they all caught fire at exactly the same time during the reception. They're still happily married years later. The table centerpieces at the reception hall were lovely. That is until they all caught fire at exactly the same time during the reception. Metal. At my friend's second wedding, officiated by his sister, when announcing them as a couple she accidentally called his new wife by his ex-wife's name. Everyone fell silent. I considered lighting myself on fire for some relief. We were on a break. At a friend of an ex's wedding, the bride didn't look at her groom once during the ceremony. She looked up, around, at her parents, not once at him, even during their vows. She was there for the show, more than anything. They walked into the reception together holding hands, an entry to Pink's "Let's Get This Party Started." She immediately dropped his hand and ran to her family. He was left dumbfounded. We were served champagne and asked to wait for a toast that never came. Peculiar things around the reception. Gorgeous venue and open bar. BTW. Like there only being photos of her in her dress and her ex-boyfriend dancing with her. Just bizarre. Rumor has it that she had a parental lock on the TV while they were dating. Saved herself for marriage, and would regulate other things in his life, like not letting him see his friends. This was 3 years ago. Still married, as far as I know, with a kiddo. Poor bastard. At my sister's wedding, the caterers shoved her off the steps about 10 minutes before the ceremony. She walked down the aisle with blood stains all over her dress. Bad timing. The sheriff where I grew up was married 4 times. While previewing the venue for his 4th wedding, he lost track of his fiancée. He yelled his previous wife's name several times in front of other people. Don't feel bad for him. His first marriage was to a 14-year-old when he was 20. He started to target me by getting weirdly friendly when I was 9, and also targeted another young girl in town. Thank frick my mom noticed and tipped off the other girl's parents. I have an aunt who loves to dance. She will dance anywhere. She decided the most appropriate time and place to dance was while the bride was walking down the aisle. Because no one in the family can tolerate her, she always sits next to me. She used my fork, swapped our dessert because she didn't like vanilla pudding. Then she tried to eat it. The best bit was during the speeches she burst into tears because she never found someone to love and she feels like she wasted her life. Made everyone feel bad for being pee at her. When, during the vows, the groom had written his own ad were heartfelt and genuine, and then the bride says ditto, then after that got pretty much no laughs. She went into this speech about how annoying she would be during the marriage. For example, I won't pick up the towels from the floor, I will always leave dirty dishes in the sink for you, etc. A marriage lasted 6 months. I was conducting a brass pipe organ ensemble for my friend. We were in the middle of a beautiful tune and the organist went to turn a page in her book. She accidentally knocked the book onto the keyboard and yelled frick at the same time the book crashed on the keys and let out a blast like a train horn. Only those closest to her actually heard her outburst. Unfortunately, that included the minister, the bride, and myself. The minister and bride were stunned and stared openly at the organist. I tried mightily to stifle laughter and eventually had to leave the room. The organist meekly picked up her book and kept playing. Oh man. There is nothing in the world that would keep me from laughing in this situation. The bride's father gave a speech and talked about how it was tough raising his daughter mostly by himself. He is divorced. This included talking about her getting her first period, as well dealing with the time her first boyfriend got mad at her because she wouldn't give him a blowjob. Awkward. Before the marriage ceremony, my dad's then girlfriend came up to my brother and I and said, "You are my sons now. You are in my family now. You are my sons." It was very strange to hear someone command you to be their son. I've learned to stop questioning my dad's life decisions. Initiate maternal love and compassion. Probably not your average idea of awkward, but in this one family wedding the bride set the reception place on fire. When she threw the bouquet it got caught on a nearby ceiling fan and utterly destroyed. Then the plastic cloth thingy involving the flowers got caught on the mechanism or something and it almost immediately short-circuited. Cue in slightly small fire that was not enough to burn the place to the ground, but enough to have to evacuate all the 300 plus guests. Wedding for co-workers of mine. The DJ is introducing the bride and groom after the wedding party. They come in and the groom dances way ahead of the bride. She lags back and the groom starts freak dancing, grinding on one of the bridesmaids. Awkward. Time for the toasts. The best man starts off by saying he has known them both for a few years. He then goes on to make sure everyone knows that he had sex with the bride before the groom. Time for the maid of honor. She starts off by saying something like, no one ever thought these two would go through with getting married. Guess we will have to see how long before this ends. 5 years later and they are still together. Lasting longer than I thought. The groom dances way ahead of the bride. She lags back and the groom starts freak dancing, grinding on one of the bridesmaids. Awkward. Time for the toasts. The best man starts off by saying he has known them both for a few years. He then goes on to make sure everyone knows that he had sex with the bride before the groom. What the frick? Well-to-do friends got married on a public beach. They had the financial and political clout to shut down the beach, but instead chose to only cordon off the seating area and pergola so normal beachgoers could enjoy a nice summer day at a respectful distance. Super trashy beachgoers flocked to gawk at the whole thing and photobomb every possible camera angle. I'm talking old guys in speedos with sunburn pot bellies putting beach chairs so close they were touching the guest chairs. Someone groped a bridesmaid and was promptly arrested in the sands nearby while screaming. Another person decided to walk down the aisle and get close ups. Removed by a burly guest. There was lots of heckling, though primarily of a political figure that was present. The reception was in a tent in a park nearby. It was amazing, and tent means canvas palace in this instance, and interlopers crashed and were removed by the large contingent of plainclothes police in a non-stop stream. Seriously, drunk beachgoers were just gathering and making runs at the tent, trying to reach the bar. Then they loudly played dumb when caught, and got louder when forcibly removed. Luckily it was hard to hear things going on outside the tent. The bride and grooms were good sports and the wedding and reception were still great, but don't get married in public on the Jersey Shore. I was like, what is going on? And then you said Jersey Shore and I was like, of course. Wife's sister's fourth, or fifth, wedding. They had enough self-awareness to low-key it, and in fact it was a surprise wedding. Everyone had been invited to a party, and the couple got married, without having told anyone it was going to happen. That wasn't the awkward part. The bride's brother took on the giving the bride away role, including a speech at the dinner table. Poor fella has always been a lightweight on booze, and got caught on the hop. His welcome to the family speech devolved into a drunken ramble about brothers-in-law coming and going for his many sisters, short marriages and family instability. Getting close, but not quite at the fully awkward part. Suddenly, our hero locked eyes with me in the crowd. He realized I had actually managed to remain married to his baby sister for 20 years, and counting. The rest of the speech was therefore dedicated to what a great bill I was, but the rest seemed to just come and go, while he stood next to his newest bill. I've seen at least 150-200 weddings. Lots of uncomfortable sexual references in the toasts or uncomfortable mentions of previous relationships, but two stories stick out in my mind. 1. A Chinese woman and a very awkward white man were set to be married. I worked for the venue, so I was standing outside of the chapel waiting to open the doors for the bride to enter, when she turned to me and asked with a scared look in her eyes, "Can you call me a cab?" I responded by laughing right there in front of her, thinking it was a joke. It was only when I realized I was the only one laughing that she was entirely serious. I opened the doors when I was instructed to because honestly, I didn't know what else to do. I saw the groom's face. He looked like he was having the best day of his life and excited to marry a woman he loved. She stopped halfway to him and began to cry. Not the "I'm so happy" crying. The "holy crap what have I gotten myself into" kind of crying. That was the last of the wedding ceremony I witnessed. I'm certain it didn't get any less uncomfortable for anyone else. The reception was equally as awkward. Throughout the night he was trying to dance with her to nearly every song. She would either reluctantly agree or dismiss him altogether. I couldn't understand why this guy couldn't tell she really didn't love him at all. Later on in the night I heard murmurings that she was only marrying him for a visa. TLDR. Woman is clearly marrying a guy for a visa. He was obviously in love with her and she was obviously not in love with him. It was clear to seemingly everyone but him. 2. The father of the bride went up to give a toast right after the cake was cut. With about an hour and a half left of the reception, the bride and groom sat down to listen, and as his toast reached the 10-minute mark they, along with everyone else, were getting frustrated that he was still speaking. He began with all of the usual wedding toast bulls and went off on some completely unrelated tangent about himself. Many times he said, "I better wrap this up," only to continue with something about himself, his recent golf game, how he wants to visit Antarctica, and other things that no one should ever talk about on the microphone at an event with a strict time limit that costs thousands of dollars. The bride, his freaking daughter, was motioning for him to stop, but he was having none of it. He only stopped 30 minutes later, grand total of 40 minutes, when he began a tangent about his recent bladder surgery, and the bride burst into tears. TLDR. Got to take a 40-minute cigarette break because the father of the bride wouldn't shut the heck up on the microphone. In the middle of the annual town rodeo, yeah, that's a thing. A bride in a spangly hat rode to the middle of the ring, is that a term, to meet a groom, both on horseback. They then got married in front of the entire town, 85% of whom were drunk and heckling. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.